Every day, freight and passenger trains traverse the rugged Sierra, a mountain range that divides the fertile valleys of California from the western deserts of Nevada. You're looking at the top of that Trans-Sierra route, Donner Pass. Donner Pass was named after a pioneer wagon train that was trapped in the winter snows of this region in the mid-1800s. When the West was still a territory, there were no highways, no roads, only animal trails. Now, while the Indians had lived here for several hundred years, the first white men to enter the West were explorers and later trappers. They came to harvest beaver pelts, which were plentiful along the banks of the Humboldt River. Then came the immigrants, looking for a new promise.
Leave leaders, go! Leave them go! Leave them go! 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 Whoa! Stop. Whoa! Whoa, easy!
In covered wagons, they crossed the plains and ascended the mountains that led to Oregon and California.
Whoa! Whoa!
Wagon trains, as they were called, were somewhat adequate for moving families to the New West. But conditions along the tortuous route were often harsh and life-threatening. In the snows of winter, only the hardiest survived. Many more did not. In the summer, mile after mile of swirling dust clouds choked their lungs. The parched desert alkali cracked open the hoofs of the animals. Grit and powdery chalk-like dust covered everything in the wagons. Through long desert valleys which seemingly had no end, these pioneer families would travel for days without water. And when they finally did find water, it usually proved to be more of a problem than a blessing.
I can't stop! I can't stop! I can't stop!
Wagon trains had their place, but what the West really needed was a more dependable mode of transportation, a railroad, something to connect east with west. The Indians called these giant engines iron horses, and soon they were crossing America on the Transcontinental Railroad. A roadbed still used today by the Southern Pacific Railroad. Now, there were other railroads in the West, some quite famous. This as an example. The Virginia and Truckee, crossing the Truckee River on a bright, sunny morning. The V&T, as it was called for short, was known as the golden girl of the short line railroads. The entire roadbed was less than 50 miles long, but in that short distance, it carried millions of dollars in silver from the Comstock mines of Virginia City. Baldwin Locomotive Works of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, built a series of classic steam engines with large drive wheels that could negotiate the sharp turns to Virginia City. The rails were shipped all the way around the Horn from Sheffield, England, where they were originally forged. These old V&T engines are highly prized in collections all around the country. Many were sold off to movie companies, which most likely saved these grand old iron horses from being cut up for scrap metal during the Second World War. Today, perhaps the best collection of V&T engines can be viewed in Carson City, Nevada, at the Permanent Rail Museum south of town. This is one of the early V&T engines called the Inyo. Like all the other engines at this museum, it's been meticulously restored to its original gleaming perfection. The boiler is wood-fired, and the brass is usually all shined up like Sunday. On select weekends, they open the doors, fire up the boilers, and roll out the engines. Now, occasionally, the engines pull onto this device that looks like a bridge. Actually, it's a large hand-operated turnstile, sort of like an overgrown merry-go-round for trains. They use it to rotate the engines off of one track and onto a new track in a short distance, so the train can move in a new direction. They blow the whistles, clang the bells, and you can take rides on these wonderful old trains in Carson City. Nevada had a few other railroads, but they're all long since faded into the history books. They ripped up the rails, cut up the engines for scrap, and the sound of their once majestic passing is but a whisper on the wind as it blows across the open desert. However, something went wrong. Wonderfully wrong. You see, there was one Western railroad that miraculously survived. And what a railroad! You are about to discover what experts say is the most complete working example of an early steam railroad anywhere in the United States. It's complete because the railroad and all the shops were used right up until 1983. The water tower, it's still here. The car shops, the passenger terminal, the dispatcher's office, everything. This wonderful old steam railroad is so complete, it's like a ghost from the past resurrected. Officially, it's called the Nevada Northern Railway. But for those who know her best, she's affectionately called the Ghost Train. In the northeast corner of Nevada is one of America's newest natural parks, the Great Basin National Park and magnificent Wheeler Peak. Inside the park is Lehman Caves, where over the centuries, water, rich in soluble limestone, has deposited fabulous formations from the ceilings and onto the floor of the caves. While the caves are deep inside the mountain, the flanks of this lofty peak support the oldest living things on the face of the earth, the bristlecone pine forest. Clinging to the rocks above 9,000 feet, the bristlecones have lived here in freezing cold and isolation since before the coming of Christ. Now, nearby all this grandeur is the thriving town of Ely, Nevada. It was but a few miles west of here that Mother Nature cleverly deposited in the ground one of the largest copper ore bodies in the world. To mine that ore and to provide transportation for passengers and freight, Mark Requa built the Nevada Northern Railroad in 1905. When completed in September of the following year, the last spike to be driven was of solid copper. In case you're wondering, that spike is still kept in a dusty old display case on the campus of the University of Nevada, Reno. Now, like all of Nevada's other steam-powered railroads, the Nevada Northern was built primarily for mining, hauling the copper ore from the pit at Copper Flat to the smelter at McGill, which was 27 miles away. In all, there were 165 miles of rail laid, so the Nevada Northern could connect to the Union Pacific line at Cobre. They needed a fast engine that could go the distance in short order, hauling passengers and freight. So, from Baldwin Locomotive Works came number 40. She was a 4060 engine, weighing in at a petite 75